Stewardship. What does the word stewardship mean? And what's the idea of it mean? And what does it have to do with student loans or picking a college or picking a career? What what does that concept mean? And why in the world are we talking about that today? And maybe even a bigger question is, what if I said to you that $2 million or maybe more related back to stewardship and student loans? How? When I say stewardship, just to be clear, I'm not talking about the people who work on an airplane who bring you drinks. So stewardship is not the idea of being a steward or stewardess on an airplane. That's not at all what I'm talking about. Although you could probably argue that they are absolutely stewarding when we look at the definition of what stewardship is. I have my idea of stewardship, and I'm going to keep saying that word over and over and over, over and over and over. Stewardship obviously is the idea of being a steward, but what does that mean? I want to give you a couple of definitions today, and we're going to tie it back into how it relates to your career goals, your gifts, and the money you spend to get there. Because while you set your sights on something, you set your sights to get somewhere, and you're looking at what your dream place is, whether that's a career or a location. There is the idea of this concept, I believe, of stewardship that hangs heavy over all of us, regardless of where you come from. And we're going to talk about stewardship today and what it means. We're going to define it and then apply it. I don't like going through defining things if I can't use them. I don't want to teach something I can't use. So if I have a better understanding, as I've gone through the past couple of podcasts, if I have a better understanding of what success is, and I can define that, and then I start to clearly focus myself on something, then I start to learn where I can use my stewardship, how I can be a steward. We're going to talk about it today. Welcome to the Project 2 Million podcast. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what stewardship is. And I'm going to define this a couple different ways. Pull this from a couple different sources and give you the definition that I believe. So hopefully you can understand how this applies. I'm going to give you the definition of stewardship from a general standpoint, and then we're going to talk about the biblical idea. And no, I'm not going to preach. There's no preaching today. I'm absolutely a believer that there is somebody higher or something higher than us, a great and all-powerful God that gave us things. But first, I want to define what stewardship is and why it's required of us, really, and how this, again, ties back to going to school, choosing a career, student loans. Stewardship, defined as the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. In other words, stewardship is managing and caring for things that belong to someone else. Isn't that interesting? Because the mindset that we're going into this is my career, my definition of success, my focus. How am I going to get there? So let me tie it into what the biblical idea of stewardship is, or Christian stewardship. And you don't have to live by, I'm not suggesting you have to live by some sort of Christian mantra or a Christian mindset. But I really love how the Bible ties this idea in. And there are multiple passages in the Bible that speak to this concept. Biblical stewardship, Christian stewardship, is the practice of selflessly managing everything we have. So our talents, our time, our money, our relationships, health is all for God. It's the practice, I'm going to repeat this, the practice of selflessly managing everything we have. Our talents, time, money, relationships, health, etc. So, what does stewardship look like to you? And how are you there? What are you doing right now with your stewardship? So, if you haven't already, I would write down where what you're managing. Start with that personal inventory. Are you managing things related to your own personal health? Are you managing, you have an autoimmune disease that overtakes you? Do you have a mother or a father or a grandmother or grandfather that you're taking care of, or siblings that you're taking care of? Are you drowning in a bad mortgage right now? Are you completely clueless and don't have any idea where you're going? You still have things to steward because you're here. You were put here. You were designed to be here for a reason. And that is to, at least in my belief, to manage things and other people. So that requires us to be selfless and to think of things outside of ourselves. So for me, that means as a father of five, I've got kids right now that are got two 10-year-olds, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, four girls and a boy at the number four, at the 4-year-old spot. And obviously my wife. Those are humans that I have to steward. When I was providing patient care, I had to steward their health. I had to make the best decisions for them. I had to go into people's houses and I had to determine whether or not the care I was giving for them was sufficient. Was it efficient? Was it cost effective for what their insurance was going to pay for? I had to have a good, solid understanding of what they were being provided within their scope of care, like the entire episode. So again, home health, PT, geriatrics. So going in and working with the elderly, I would have to understand, well, okay, do they need care beyond me? Do I need to have a nurse involved? Do I need to have an occupational therapist involved, a speech therapist? Do we need to send them to the emergency room? Do I need to contact their pharmacist because it looks like they're having a medication issue? So all of that is stewardship of that person's health, constantly thinking of myself or of something outside of myself. So there was patient load and then family load, and those are human beings. Those are things that are tangible, things that I'm still stewarding to this day, although it's more students now than it is patients. Giving of myself, managing things outside of myself. So what does that look like for you? What are you managing? Are you managing your job schedule? Are you trying to figure out how you're going to manage jobs and school? Are you trying to figure out how in the world if you're a parent, how in the world you're going to steward your money a little better so you can save for your children's college or if they're going to college? And what are you teaching your kids about stewardship? Another version of another word I would use for this is shepherding. That's another biblical term. And we're so incredibly disconnected from the idea of being a steward or being a shepherd, nowadays, because not many of us are actually shepherds. We save that for people in farmland and other countries like Ireland that have beautiful green pastures and cows and sheep to manage. And they just give us milk and butter. But I am shepherding. I'm taking care of my flock, and my flock has needs. And sometimes that means money. And sometimes that means healthcare. And sometimes that means physical needs like going to a park for playtime for my kids. All things I'm stewarding within this ball of time that I'm given here on this earth. And so when I think of choosing a college, choosing a career path, how does that affect my stewardship and what's my mindset for stewardship going in? Because that's probably the most important piece here is what is your mindset for stewardship going in? If you're going to try to get into a healthcare career, and it's not just specific to healthcare, if you're watching this or listening to this is not just a healthcare thing. But after having sat on multiple admissions committees and admitting students into programs that are selective admission, that means that people are fighting to get in. They're competitive by nature. One of the things I hear the most is, well, I want to help people. And so there's this idea of being selfless. But what's the cost to you to try to help somebody? If your main point is, I want to help somebody, well, you can go help somebody by driving past a homeless person and giving them a sack of Chick-fil-A. You can go give them $5. You can, whatever. You can find a neighbor that can't get out of bed. You can help an old lady across the street. There's a lot of ways to help people. You can pay for somebody's groceries in the grocery line that's struggling to find their money in their pocketbook or they left their wallet at home, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to help people. So you obviously have gifts and skills and talents that you want to use. What for? There seems to be this innate nature for people who are in healthcare or want to get into healthcare to take care of others, to improve the human lives of others. So when we look at stewardship, we're looking at the idea, as I mentioned before, when we define stewardship, is this idea of using money, time, skills, talents, gifts, whatever the word is you want to use, for the benefit of others. And I'm using it selflessly, and I'm using it as it was given to me in my mind by our creator, by the one who designed us and put us here. What if you got into a career without the idea of stewardship? And I don't mean caring. Just erase the word caring this, because care is kind of inherent in stewardship. How does a mindset for stewardship inform my path? And how can that might be harsh. How can a compromised idea of stewardship cost me money? How's it going to cost me $2 million? It's by not having a mindset for numbers, for math. Math is like yuck. And stewardship is not just numbers. This is one of the ways we're going to talk about stewardship across the course of these podcasts. Stewardship is not just about numbers, but we're going to put it into a numbers context, because when you speak numbers, people listen, to be quite honest. And then if you can hear the numbers and you can see the numbers, learn how to do the math. Actually, you can have the computer, have the internet do the math for you. Then you start to see where stewardship, the cost of a decision can impact your stewardship. And so here's what I mean. Let's say I go into a career and I haven't done the math. I haven't looked into it. I've got so I'm going back to the previous podcast. Got a poor vision of success. I'm not focused on what in the world my skills are, my gifts, where I think I want to be. I'm not doing any math. I'm listening to voices that are outside of me. I don't have wise counsel. I don't have all the good stuff that I need. I'm just following people in trendy outfits, or influencers, or people that I go to college with that look like they're in cool majors. And I think I want to do that because it just feels healthy. I just want to do that. Or, man, that looks rugged and raw. I think I'm going to be a welder because welding is awesome. Look how dirty I can get. Look how I can use a blowtorch all day. I'm not even sure if that's what it's called. I haven't spent any time to get a day in the life of. I haven't spent any time understanding what the profession is actually like. I haven't dug into the statistics. I haven't looked at what the cost of living is wherever I think I want to live, or the cost of the college. I just know that loans are really easy to get and they can sign off on anything. And I don't even know what the interest rate is, but I don't really need to know that right now because I don't have to pay these off till I get out of school. And when I get out of school, I'm going to make a ton of money because it's healthcare and healthcare people are smart. Sorry, not unless you want to be an orthopedic surgeon that works for 10 plus years in a really, really difficult environment. Upper echelon, making $600,000 or more. Again, let's talk numbers. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. In my profession alone, and I've mentioned this before, salaries have not really increased since I got into the profession. They have a little bit and then they dropped. Same is true for a lot of healthcare professions. When other people are in charge of what you're paid, as in an insurance company or Medicare, Medicaid, revenue is determined by them and your income comes off your revenue. So let's tie it all back to stewardship. And let's use a couple of examples. So the average, let's put some of this into numbers, and then you have homework to do. Because your idea of stewardship and what you want to give and what you want to share and how you want to manage the things that you're given is impacted by what the load is that's put on you by bad decisions. And maybe bad decisions is a harsh phrase. Uninformed decisions, let's put it that way. So med school, average student loan debt hovers right around $200,000. And there are more. I've even seen med school students that haven't even graduated yet, and they're looking at over $500,000 in med school student loan debt. Even had one that was $600,000. That's unacceptable. I don't even know what the word is for that. Unacceptable is the best I got. Average RN, so registered nurse, this is a really wide spectrum because you can be an RN by going to community college. You can be an RN by going to a university. So you can spend $9,000, maybe even less, depending on your state, or you can spend 30 to 60. That's where you need to do your homework. Why would you go to a university over a community college to get the same professional license, especially you can go to school and your employer will pay for it later if you want to go back to school. Nurses have this amazing ladder to climb and such career flexibility. That's for another post. PT, average student loan debt, $143,000 to $146,000, and apparently 91%, I believe, of PT students carry student loan debt, and the average again is $143,000 to $146,000. PA, physician assistant, and we're just speaking healthcare here. I'm not looking at anything else right this moment, but you can find these online. These are pretty easy if you want to do your due diligence on Google and find, well, I want to be a business student. I'm going to be in healthcare management. I'm going to get an MBA in healthcare management. Okay, where? Look at the numbers. How much is it going to cost you? Who's paying for it? The point here is numbers and how it impacts stewardship. OT, so occupational therapy, average student loan debt sits somewhere around 100. It's another wide range because there's a shift in that educational level right now, the time of this. So it's anywhere from 125 to upwards. I've even seen $200,000, which is crazy. Let's put that into a context. So you get out, you go to school, you get out, you're going to have a loan payment. If you deferred that payment till you got out, then you've had interest accruing at a graduate rate. Most of these graduate programs have right now the rate is 7.5. I think it's 7.54. You can find that out by looking up on the Federal Reserve site or a financial aid loan servicer website. They'll give you the loan rates for grad loans and for undergrad loans. But we're doing math right here on graduate programs, and then we can talk about the difference briefly on technical programs. So if I've got $125,000 in loans, I graduate, if I'm paying off in 10 years, which is pretty optimistic. That's generally the set term. You can extend it out, and you obviously have a lower payment, but you pay a lot more in interest. Again, do the math. You can Google these calculators anywhere. $125,000 in student loan debt. My payment is $1,484 a month. I end up paying $53,000 in interest on the back end of that. So over 10 years. So almost $1,500 a month. $145,000 in student loan debt. My loan payment looks like $1,721, and I've paid almost $62,000 in student loan interest. So let's add that. So 145 plus 62, that's $207,000. That's a lot of money. And over time, how much could you be putting that towards something else? Because right now, when you're that deep into student loans, and I'm not dissuading anybody from getting into healthcare, but when you get that deep into student loans, you are so buried in financial muck that's related to yourself, to your own pursuit of success, that it starts to compromise your ability to steward your gifts and your money to others. And it actually impacts you because, well, we'll get to that in just a second. Let's keep going with the numbers. $160,000 in debt, a payment of $1,900 a month. That's almost $2,000 a month. And some students have that right now very easily. That ends up after 10 years of payments, assuming they're paid off, not refinanced, or forgiven, that there's $68,000 worth of interest. That's $228,000 that was spent towards that degree path. So let's go somewhere in the middle. You've got $1,721. You've got that $145,000 loan amount, and you've got $1,721 a month that you're paying. Let's put it in a salary context. I don't know what every state's going to be like. Every state has some different state income tax rate. Some have no income tax rate. And if you aren't aware of that, which I just recently learned in front of a classroom, that even graduate students aren't aware that states like Texas, Nevada, Florida, Washington, Tennessee, and a few others, that they don't have state income tax. So you bring home more money. They weren't aware of that. So how about that? There's your education for the day. Um, you have your loan payment, 1721, and I'm just going to go off what a PT would make because that's in my wheelhouse, and it costs about $145,000 in debt to do PT right now. That's the average. So I make $80,000 to $85,000. I'm generally going to bring home after benefits and insurance, and that's probably not including retirement contribution. So we're going from gross income to net. I'm going to be looking at somewhere around $56 to $60,000, maybe a little more, depending on what your benefits are. So essentially, I'm bringing home 5,000, somewhere around between 5,000 and 5,500 a month. Let's say that. I've just put a third of that into my student loans. That's not housing. That's not a car payment. That's not any retirement contributions. That's not groceries. That's not gas money. That's not anything else that you would normally put in your budget. And if you don't have a budget, we'll talk about that sometime soon. Lots of resources for that too. $1,800, third of your check for 10 years is going to a student loan. Did you know that ahead of time? Why not? What was in your way? And where else could that money be going? Because if you're able to steward, if you made a good, an informed decision, so this is stewarding yourself, stewarding your life. You're making a good informed decision about the career you want, how much money it costs, the cost of living in a certain location, what the loan payment's going to look like and how long you're going to have to be paying that. And what does that look like in the real world? And what are the trends of the salaries in some of these professions and in these locations? Because if I want to live in California, it's going to look a lot different than if I want to live in Mississippi or Alabama. And the salaries don't really make up the difference so much. So what math have I done? Don't be scared of the math. Let the math inform you because the numbers are the first part of the stewardship journey. Think about where your check is going and who you could be giving to. So let's start put this into a context. Who could you be giving to? For me, we live by a Christian idea of tithing, and that doesn't always limit us just to 10%, which I think the definition of tithe is 10%. That's kind of a traditional mindset. We try to give more. The more we give, the more we actually end up getting back. It's this really bizarre thing, and I've heard so many stories about this happening. But we try to give 10% every month, if not more, off the top. But you're already when you're bringing home $80,000 and you give 10% of that. So that's, let's do the math. $80,000 is $6,500 a month. That's so 10% from the gross is $650 on top of the $1,800 that you're already almost paying for your student loans. You're getting close to half your check gone. So you're more likely to pay for yourself and your own needs and your loan because that was what you pursued. You went to school, you fought for this, you were competitive for this. I wanted to get into this nursing program. I wanted to get into med school. I wanted to be a PA. I wanted to do this, this, and this. And I'm going to go to whatever school I need to get in. Sometimes even the cheapest options aren't. They're still expensive. Where's your check going? Because there are other options for giving. And I don't just mean giving to a church. I mean giving to organizations, which I have no skin in the game for these, but places like Heifer International, where if you can buy a flock of sheep or a cow for a family and it provides everything they need, a box or a nest of chicks. You're actually providing life. You're giving life to somebody by giving money to these organizations. You can prevent human trafficking. You can give money to somebody on the street. You can fund somebody. You can help pay for somebody else's adoption. You can help fund somebody else's medical school bill, or not med school, but medical bills for a struggling child. Think about where you could give, because that's ultimately what we're called to do. And we're starting here, this podcast, with the numbers side of it. Think about what you could do for your own self in investing. I'm going to take $1,000 of that $1,800. Like, what if I did the math ahead of time and I was able to find a path that reduced my loan payment by $1,000? So there's an extra $1,000 in my bank account that I can put to saving for a house, that I can put in my retirement fund. And that's where it starts becoming about getting closer to that $2 million, even more. Because if I make wiser decisions and I have less to pay for on myself, then I'm stewarding to other people, and I'm also improving how I steward what I get and what I end up with in the long run. So stewardship, there's got to be a heart for it. You have to have the mindset of, what am I doing to manage what I'm given? It can easily become a numbers game, for sure. And sometimes numbers are the loudest. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not going to judge that. You can judge that. But when the numbers are what bury you, and research is showing that the higher the numbers, the worse the patient care is that's provided, because the employee is so overly burdened mentally and emotionally and physically by trying to work so hard to pay it off, then you're actually not stewarding what you have or what somebody else has very well. So $2 million is connected, maybe more, maybe less, depending on your situation. It's all connected back to stewardship. What you do, how you give it, how you manage your time, how you manage yourself, how you manage your people. So what are you going to do to steward better? Here's what I would do. Here's my advice as we finish this up. Make some notes. Make some notes of your gifts. In the course that we have, there's a notebook where you get to jot all this down. It comes free with the course. And then you can start to journal along the way. What my gifts are, what's most important to me, who do I want to manage, how do I want to manage my own self, what goals do I have, places, just write down all of it and see how giving, stewarding, managing what you have within yourself and outside of yourself, how does that impact your journey? See you next time.